Welcome into Overtime, presented by McDonald's. It was a wild week one, and we're going to have it all here right on this week's episode. Alongside John Bruce, I'm Dewey Dailey as we bring you into today's show. With week one behind us, we'll look back on the wild landscape it left for us here as we will also look ahead to some week two matchups and some impact players as well. John, it's always nice when the Friday night football season is back, and I think we got a good glimpse of that and even had a doubleheader on the live streams this week, so it was definitely a good way to kick off the fall sports season here in 2023.
Yeah, we got to start on Thursday night at Portsmouth, a beautiful complex. That might be, if you're an athletic director, man, that's something a lot to live up to with what, the way Portsmouth treats the media is outstanding there. Really, a fun night of football. The game was really fun for a half, got a little bit out of hand. We'll talk about that, in our game reviews, but it was still, fun to watch two, excited communities to get out and watch their teams play. And, like I said, it felt really important, as that opening game, all eyes were on it. And
I think there was Philo and Athens also had a game.
And actually Alexander at Waterford also, the Wonders. I know it's the Wildcats, but so got to be there on Thursday, and I took off on Friday, and you guys got to witness a classic on Friday. I was able to catch up and watch the live stream.
I saw your comment on the live stream.
Yeah,
that was good.
I was more or less listening as I was driving. I was not watching, but fun thing, I was actually at a rest stop as Waverly scored and was getting ready to go for two, so I did not drive until
the game was over.
Yeah, so the game was over, as that's something we'll talk about in the reviews as well, but a lot of close games, a couple blowouts. Notre Dame decided to take Manchester
78 to nothing?
78 to 6.
Oh, 6. Sorry.
Yeah. So if you had the over, or not the over, if you had Notre Dame minus 71.5, you got paid. So that was we won't talk about the blowouts so much on this show, but we'll talk about some close games. We'll shout out some kids that maybe we don't cover the game specifically because they may have been blowouts, but we'll also talk about some kids. I'm also going to rant about something real quick. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready to go.
So as I drove through 6 states this weekend, I don't think you drive a motorcycle, do you, dog?
No,
not a motorcycle driver. If you drive a motorcycle,
do you drive a motorcycle? I feel like you ride a
motorcycle.
I don't really think you drive a motorcycle.
Yeah. When you're getting your motorcycle license, I just want to know, is it required to be the dumbest person ever?
Well, I know
most careless, reckless.
I know, like with drivers, with like taking a driving test, like you can get knocked a few points. Like with motorcycles, it's like you have to get a 100. Like if you can't get knocked points. Like it's either you get a 100% or you're not getting your motorcycle, because it's like a lot of mobility stuff.
Yeah,
and obviously lacking mobility on a motorcycle is a little more dangerous to your actual life thing. Like if you ding a car in a car, it's like your car maybe got whacked, but like in a motorcycle, that's like, you bump into somebody going 10 miles an hour. I mean, that could just be fall over and not wearing a helmet, and that's kind of the end of it. But
so we got to Chicago on Friday. There was a motorcycle and there was 2 people on it. One didn't have a helmet, which is understandable, I guess. Did not, wear your helmet. But they were going like 40 on the freeway, which, okay, at least they weren't speeding out of control, I guess. And then didn't really see anyone with any issues until the ride home yesterday. There's a dude just weaving in and out of traffic. He was going like 120 yesterday in Chicago. And shocker, either he clipped a car or a car clipped him. Thankfully, he wasn't going 120 at that point, but he definitely went down to his side and skidded off the road. And he was alive.
Probably left some of his skin
Yeah.
on the road there.
He was alive when we saw him, at least. He was like moving around. He looked annoyed. But later on, down the road, there was like a 4 to 6 car wreck, and there was no one by the motorcycle that we saw. So, I mean, I think if you drive a motorcycle, please be careful. You know, I know there's the stuff of watch out for motorcycles, but motorcycles, watch out for cars too. Because, like, I know a lot of people that are bad drivers, and they will not watch out for you. So please be careful on motorcycles. But, you know, we're here to talk football.
Not motorcycles.
Yeah.
So we'll jump into the game reviews first, and then we'll have some player highlights a little later on, and then we'll look ahead to some some week 2 games coming up this Friday and a little later on Saturday. We'll start off with Fairland at West. What a game that was in comparison to, it's kind of the opposite of last year in terms of the over-under. What was a 1-point 14-13 Dragon win last year was now a 3-point 32-29 win this year on the road. I actually picked Fairland, so actually me and Carson, because Carson officially picked.
I think I officially picked Fairland as well.
Maybe Carson picked West.
Either way, me, Carson, and Derek are all 6-4. Brock is way behind at 5-5. So,
oh man, but Fairland, what a game that was for the Dragons. If you haven't seen the video yet, you can find it on a couple places throughout Twitter. But quarterback Peyton Jackson, it was a 15-yard touchdown. Really, it wasn't even a designed quarterback run. It was more of a last resort decision right up the Dragon sideline across the pylon. Great blocking, by the way, down the stretch there. Got in the end zone as time expired, and the Dragons steal one on the road and head back to, actually they're on the road again in week 2. They got to go down to Ironton. Well, not really down to Ironton. That's a little more local for them than it is for us. But a tough week 2 matchup for the Dragons in week 2. But for that game overall, Peyton Jackson, 17 of 13, 210 yards and a touchdown, had 9 rushes for 32 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. The backs for Fairland, Cam Kitts had 90 yards and a touchdown, and you're going to have to help me out here. Quentin Cremines?
Probably Cremines.
Quentin Cremines had 70 yards and a touchdown as well. And then we talked a lot about Bryson Hunt in the preview and how much of an impact he would be for not only the Dragons, but just how well of a player he was overall in the area. 6 catches for 107 yards. And then Keegan Smith had the lone receiving touchdown, also had 5 catches for 50 yards with that touchdown. And for West, we kind of questioned who was going to make the throws for them because you lose Mitchell Irwin. We kind of figured Mason Parker would fill in for Sissel as a back, but the main question, at least for me, was who would step in to throw the ball. Well, the answer kind of ended up being nobody, as they only attempted 6 passes. Now, Cole Tipton did attempt the most with, I think, 5 passes. Yes, he had 5 pass attempts, and I think he completed 3 of them. But it was kind of just like, okay, we're not going to throw the ball. We're just going to run the ball. And it really worked. I mean, they didn't win the game, but they won the game. They were one stop away from winning the game. But on the ground,
everything but win the game.
Right. Yeah. They led the game up until quite literally the final second when Jackson scampered into the end zone from 15 yards out. But, he had 107 yards on the ground. Mason Parker also had the only passing touchdown of the game, which he was 1 for 1 for 26 yards, which was caught by Jeffrey Bishop, and that was his only catch with that touchdown. And then Anthony Bishop and Cole Tipton both had 75 or more yards on the ground and a rushing touchdown as well. So, they definitely just adopted the ground and which it was kind of already ground and pound last year with Sissel, but Irwin definitely aired it out. I think, if I remember correctly, I could look back. I think Tipton and Bishop both had 500 or more yards last year, which, just judging off of this game, probably won't be a Senator receiver with more than 300 or 400 yards. I think Bishop led the team in receiving that game and had 26 yards. But you got to do what you're dealt cards at the beginning of the year, and you don't really pick your players based on what offense you run. You got to pick your offense based on what players you have. So I will say West definitely performed a lot better offensively. I thought it might take them a couple games to kind of get in the groove of things, but I mean, they clearly just came right out of the gates ready to roll, and that's why it was a 3-point loss to a really good Fairland team. Now, in week 2, they stay at home. They take on Portsmouth, who we saw on Thursday. I think those two teams are pretty similar. They both have new quarterbacks. One of them is, with Cameron Williams at Portsmouth, he's kind of more of a quarterback, whereas for West, it's kind of just like take your best athlete and turn them into a quarterback. I know we'll get into that game a little bit later, I believe, in one of our previews. So we'll jump into that matchup a little later on, but just for now, I think that'll be a really interesting matchup in week 2. It's the same thing, though, both for Portsmouth coming off of a win against Valley, West coming off West coming off of a loss against Fairland. So kind of the same atmosphere, or I should say the same environment for the game as it was a season ago. So I think that'll be an interesting one to look at in week 2. But that Fairland and West game, definitely one of the bigger and most exciting finishes in week 1.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the game you covered on Friday, but we talked about 2 games to cover, and that was one of them was what we were going to stream. And I think, either one ended up, they both came down to the last minute, maybe not the last second.
The last 26 seconds, pretty much.
But, just an outstanding individual play by Jackson. And you mentioned the blocking downfield. And I feel like if you watch the play back from the one up by the press box, that view, it looked like a couple of the Fairland receivers noticed that Jackson was coming and kept going on their route, bringing defenders, dragging defenders over. So the defenders had a impossible time on getting to Jackson before he crossed the goal line, and just outstanding team play. Obviously Jackson gets the credit as making the great individual play, but as you mentioned, those blocks downfield were obviously vital for him to get in and score that and pull off the shocker at the Rock.
Enemy territory, go in and get the win on the road.
Yeah, and that's a very good series that they've started between Fairland and West, as those are 2 of the really high level programs down along the side of river. And, it's definitely a game to watch for next year as well. Yeah. So for my first game review, we're going to talk about Zane Trace and Logan Elm. When you talked about the staff picks, we were 0-4 on this one, as apparently we wrote off Logan Elm, but they didn't write back.
Man.
As, Zane Trace did start off with a touchdown on Carter Langley connecting to Aiden Dunn on a 38-yard flea flicker. Logan Elm just couldn't get anything going offensively early, but Carson Summers had a 24-yard pick 6 to even the score. Logan Elm took the lead on the Landon Thompson 1-yard touchdown plunge before Zane Trace answered with a 1-yard touchdown score from Blake Phillips. The Braves took the lead into the half on a 9-yard touchdown pass from Aaron Walters to Cam Smith. Smith had a monstrous game for the Braves. He had a couple picks, including one that set up, Walters to connect with Camden Red for a score before Walters connected with Summers on a score. The Braves finished their scoring as Thompson scored a short touchdown late in the game. Zane Trace was able to kick a field goal and a score late, but 39-23, a pretty dominant win for Logan Elm, forcing 3 turnovers through the air. Logan Elm had a couple fumbles early, but once they kind of adjusted and fought through the adversity of their own turnovers, they were able to create turnovers of their own. Aaron Walters was very efficient on the night, 22 of 30 for 263 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Summers and Smith were each over 90 yards receiving and had a touchdown. Smith with the 2 interceptions as mentioned, and Summers with an interception. 3 interceptions on the game. They won the turnover battle, fought through some adversity, and did a really good job. Neither team could really get things going running, which is kind of surprising for Zane Trace. Both teams had over just a little over 100 yards on 30-plus carries, so just barely over 3 yards a pop for each team. Blake Phillips had nearly 70 yards rushing for the Pioneers, and Carter Langley had, I believe it was 59 yards rushing for them. They couldn't get the other guys going like they have in the past, where, Phillips was, sometimes he was the top running option, sometimes he was second last year, but for Zane Trace, it doesn't get much easier as they do return home. They got Waverly in week 2. Logan Elm takes on a county rival in Westfall, who can really put up points. They put up a lot of points against Massive Plains. They are playing some young guys. Westfall is sophomore running back. Bryce Wickline, senior quarterback, is outstanding. That one, we'll see how well Logan Elm does in pass defense in that game. For Zane Trace, they ran out of the spread, did a lot of running still. But first game with the new coach, it's going to be to get used to the system. And, we'll see if they can do it in week 2 against Waverly.
Another game that we're going to take a look back at was on Thursday. It was our Valley at Portsmouth game. That was not just but really all of Southern Ohio's opening matchup here in 2023. For Portsmouth, it was a 59-29 victory, their 7th consecutive win over the Indians. It kind of goes without saying what a game from Chase Heiland.
Yes.
I mean, we'll get into him a little bit later in the kind of player-specific reviews. And then Cameron Williams, only a freshman quarterback, only attempted 7 passes, completed 5 of them, 46 yards and a touchdown, did a lot on the ground, had 77 yards with 2 touchdowns. And then Nick Copley and Levon Cobb were there as well. Both had rushing touchdowns. And
I was so pumped when Cobb got his, because he's the fullback, and it's awesome when the fullback's able to score.
And, obviously those guys mostly in blocking roles for Heiland and did a great job at that, clearly. But also not bad change of pace backs.
Yeah.
With Heiland, it's kind of more of that, like, H-back kind of speedy guy. And then, with especially Cobb, it's like that, just powerful back, and you get that with Copley as well, because both of those guys, I know for sure Copley, I can't remember if Cobb was on defense or not, but I know Copley was...
He's big and strong, so
right,
I'm guessing he might have been in there.
Copley had a big impact on defense for the Trojans, and I know my dad even mentioned it on the broadcast, but with Cobb, obviously a senior, but with Copley and Heiland, I mean, you're going to get those two guys back next year as well, so definitely things to look forward to for the Trojans. And the loss for Valley, Gabe McNeil, kind of a similar game to Chase Heiland, not quite to that level, but 12 carries for 56 yards, 2 touchdowns. I know he really struggled on the ground in the first half, but had a couple big runs in the second half. And along with the 56 yards on the ground, he had 4 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown. Carson Powell, the sophomore quarterback for Valley, 12 of 25, 208 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then the lone receiver for the Indians, who really had any large impact, at least statistically receiving for the Indians in the game, was Aiden Wattell. Had one miraculous catch, kind of a Noah Brown over, not even really over the shoulder, but kind of like
around,
hugged him and caught it, and then housed it for 71 yards at the end of the half. And it was a 9-point game at halftime, 24-15. That touchdown was right. I think that actually,
it was the last play
when time expired, I believe, or was there a cut? Did they have to kick off afterwards?
No, it was when time expired, and they had, there was a defensive pass interference on the play.
Oh, okay. And they went for 2.
Yeah, they went for 2
and cut it down to 9. So obviously a 30-point final, but really for the first 3 quarters, it wasn't like that. It was actually pretty competitive. Definitely throughout the first half, and then a lot of the third quarter as well.
I believe the fourth quarter was 20-0.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I know there was a fumble on a kickoff or on a kick return for Valley, and it obviously got a little out of hand at the end, but definitely not a bad way to kick things off. It was overall an exciting game, a lot of offensive fireworks, and for Valley, they're back at home against Colgrove, who obviously lost a big piece in their backfield, and then Portsmouth, as mentioned already, will go to the west side to take on the Senators. So not a bad way to kick off the 2023 fall sports season on last Thursday.
Yeah, so we talked off the air about how when you played, there's a lot of one-way or two-way guys. And for Valley, I don't know if they had anyone that wasn't a two-way guy.
Yeah, it was tough.
So they're very young, one senior, I believe only 8 juniors. McNeil and Powell, both sophomores. So they've got a lot of guys coming back. It looked like they figured some stuff out running the ball in that third quarter, but ultimately just Portsmouth was able to kind of lean on them. And once they couldn't move the ball in the air, besides there's one catch by Jaden Rideout that was ridiculous in that, I believe it was in the fourth quarter. Valley wasn't really able to move the ball in the air. They didn't have a first down in the first half. They scored twice on 2 long passes, but I thought Portsmouth, really did a good job of kind of leaning on their running game. And I thought for a freshman quarterback making his first start, I thought that Williams did a really good job for them. So, those are 2 teams to watch for. I think Valley's got some more growing pains than what Portsmouth's going to deal with. But I do think that'll be an outstanding game again next year just because, with Valley, they're getting a ton of experience through this. And if they can stay healthy through the year, we might be able to see them upset somebody late in the year. But with, I think they'll pick up a couple wins because they got some nice athletes. I think they're a well-coached team also. And I think Portsmouth may be a little better than expectations. But we'll see this week where they take on West.
Right. And, obviously with Valley being in the SOC2 for football, you're going to get a matchup against Northwest, who I think they match up with more maybe a little bit more favorable than Portsmouth, and then they'll get Oak Hill as well. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of any other. Minford possibly could be a decent game with them. They finished, I think, last, right above Oak Hill in the SOC2 last year, so really can only go up from there, and we'll see what they do as they wrap up wrap up non-league play.
SOC2, and the OVC that Portsmouth's in, neither one of those leagues are like, you better bring your big boy pants every week.
Yep.
And, because it's going to be a lot of hard hitting, some high quality football in those areas of our coverage area. So moving on next, we had Unioto at Vinton County. Last year's game, Unioto was kind of in control for the most part. For a late score for Vinton County, made it 21-6. 2 years ago, down at Vinton County won 12-7. Had a late goal line stand in that game. A couple of drop touchdowns for Unioto in that game might have made a big difference. But, on Friday, it was a wild game, like very strange.
Yeah.
Unioto wins 21-20, but it starts off both teams, trading possessions early. Vinton County gets down inside the 5, actually to the 1 on 4th and goal and gets stopped. Unioto then scores 3 plays later on a Newton Hoops to Cody Braden 70-yard touchdown score. How's that for your first career high school reception, a 70-yard touchdown score on Friday night? The sophomore Braden was one of those really speedy kids. Obviously tied or either the furthest or tied for the furthest drive in school history with a 99-yard drive. Vinton County's Lane Hayborn scored 2 long touchdowns that ended up giving Vinton County the lead. One was a 36-yard pass from Parker Schonborn, and the next was a 41-yard run where it, just listening to it, sounded like the commentators from Vinton County expected him to be tackled multiple times on it. He broke 2 or 3 tackles and ended up scoring. So they took a 14-7 lead. And really, Unioto couldn't get much going offensively. They were having a struggle running the ball, and the passing game was pretty effective, but they punted late in the half, and it seemed like Vinton County was going to be able to drive down and maybe get a field goal before the end of the half, but they end up putting the ball in the air. I believe it was Ben Griffin had a hit on the quarterback, and ball kind of fluttered, and sophomore David Long pulled down an interception, setting up Unioto to possibly be able to go down and score before the half. And then they said, we're not running a 2-minute offense. We're just going to run one play. And Newton Hoops hit Caden Cartwright for 58-yard touchdown. And I don't know if a kid that came into high school at like 5'1", you would think would be like mossing people, but when he's a junior, but like he's up to almost 6 foot now, and like he just went over top of his defender and pulled it over his head a little bit, like that catch on Thursday. And then when he came down, he just turned and sprinted into the end zone for the score. So 14-14 at the half. First play from scrimmage for Vinton County in the second half. They tried to run a jet sweep, which is kind of out of character for what they've been running, and they fumbled, and 2 guys went after the ball. One of them was Unioto's Ethan Summer, who ripped it out at the 1. Next play, Newton Hoops scores 21-10 because they have a really good kicking game. I'm going to break out a fun fact for you. How many kickers do you think Unioto has on their roster listed as kicker?
Well, just because you're making a big deal of it, I'll say 3.
4.
4.
Yeah, 4 kickers. I believe one's a kickoff specialist. One is the field goal specialist, which is Haynes. I think Pettigrew's the kickoff specialist. Rocky Reinhardt is as a backup kicker, and then oh my gosh, I can't think of his name. He's a sophomore, but he'll be the kicker next year. It's just kind of, and it's just nice to have that depth there. So Unioto takes a 21-14 lead. Now, Vinton County was able to put together a drive, and Garrett Brown scored from 8 yards out with about 9 minutes left in the game. But that's where Unioto was able to, not put the game away because there's still a lot of time left. But Unioto's KB Perkins, a junior defensive lineman, blocked the extra point, 21-20, and that was ultimately the difference. Unioto got a couple stands late. I don't think Vinton County got past the 50 again, and Newton Hoops was able to take a knee inside the 10-yard line as time ran down, and Unioto was able to escape with a 1-point victory. For Vinton County, Garrett Brown ran for 142 yards and a score on the day. Newton Hoops threw for 229 yards, while Cutright had 92 yards receiving, also had an interception. David Long, to go with his interception late in the half, had 13 tackles also in the game. Perkins had a good game, tipped a couple passes as well. Cody Braden had the 1 catch for 70 yards for Unioto. And Hoops' second touchdown to Cutright, which was his 32nd career touchdown, which is the Unioto school record for passing touchdowns.
With 9 guaranteed games remaining, and potentially a playoff game or 2 as well.
And with 16 teams getting in the playoffs, pretty sure he's going to have at least 1 playoff game. We'll see how their season goes. They face an improved Amanda Clear Creek coming up this week.
Amanda Clear Creek, I think they picked up a win.
They picked up the win. They beat Lyndon McKinley. They had a running clock on them. Lyndon McKinley is not very good, but still, for an Amanda team that was not even close to winning last year, they brought in a new coach. He's an Amanda guy. He's brought a lot of fun and energy into the program. We'll see how big of a leap they've taken. Is it a step in the right direction, or is it a leap in the right direction? So we'll see in week 2 as Unioto will have their first home game of the season. Vinton County will go on the road to Circleville to take on the Tagus in week 2. So I think with Vinton County, 21-20, obviously the blocked extra point is the difference scoring wise. I think, a lot of good things to look forward to for them on the season. I know we'll be seeing Unioto in week 3 when they take on Waverly. Unioto just has to keep getting better. As Coach Hoop said in his interview after the game, it's a lot of guys that, while they're good football players, haven't played a lot on Friday nights. So getting that experience, in a win especially, is vital. And, I know he's hoping that, they can start to roll in the right direction for them. And, with Newton Hoops and his assortment of receivers, because Ashton Crace had around 50 yards receiving as well. They're going to get Blake Hoops back soon from an injury. You just got a bunch of athletic, good players that they can throw to, and they figure things out defensively as well.
I will say that going back to just the game being at Vinton County, the McDonald's right in front of the school or on the other side of the road is, I would say throughout the week, is probably one of the busiest McDonald's, like Monday through Friday.
Yeah, especially at like
from like
2 specific times of the day.
Right. I would say from about, maybe 6 a.m. to like 8:30 a.m. and then from like 2 o'clock to like 3:30 or 4, that place is just banging.
Because
constantly.
Well, and then Vinton County is the only school in Vinton County, so you got kids driving quite a while to get back home, and might need a snack, and they're they're loving it. It's right there.
Right. Speaking of McDonald's, John, I don't know about you, but I'm starting to get a little hungry over here again.
Yeah, and I've almost finished my $1.29 McDonald's Coke. I appreciate their sponsorship.
Yeah, whether you're on the road and hungry or just need a quick bite to eat, make sure to stop by your local McDonald's with locations in Chillicothe, Greenfield, Circleville, and right here in Waverly. McDonald's, the proud, exclusive official sponsor of Overtime.
Yeah, and always look for the golden arches and not the golden arcs. It's a movie reference.
Yeah, because
Coming to America.
What you're talking
about.
McDowell's. Coming to America, that sounds familiar.
There was a new one a couple years ago, but it was Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall, and they each played a bunch of characters. And he worked at McDowell's.
McDowell's?
Yeah, where they had the golden arcs.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my dad said something to me about that because the hamburger was called something funny too.
Yeah.
But I can't remember. It was like obviously a play on the Big Mac, but I can't remember what it was called.
Yeah, and he was like coming up with all kinds of ways to not get sued. Yeah. So it was that's one of my favorite movies growing up.
But another game in our second live stream of the week, our first Friday night live stream, was actually right here in Tigertown as Waverly hosted Miami Trace in their third meeting since they've kind of not revamped but revisited that for their opening matchup of the season. So Waverly had won the first two, and 21 it was like 42-3. It may not have been that extreme, but it was a blowout. Mm-hmm. And then last year, obviously 42-39 or 44-39 was the final. So Waverly had a 2-game winning streak coming into the season. Game was tied 13-13 at half, and eventually came down to just a 2-point conversion with 26 seconds left. If you didn't get to see it live, we'll put a clip in there now so you can kind of see how that game played out.
First down and 10 on their own 19. Kelly back to pass, airs it out to the right side. He's got a bear, hook and lateral, down the sideline, it's Hurd. He stays in bounds to the 30, 25, 20, pushed out of bounds. He'll be marked out of bounds all the way back at the Panther 43. Nonetheless, a huge play on first down for Waverly, now in Panther territory. Still 34 seconds to play.
Again, I'm not sure the clock's an issue. The only problem is if they complete a pass that's not a first down.
First and 10 on the 43. Kelly back to pass, airing it out deep for Bear. He's got him! Touchdown, Tigers!
I promise you, Waverly will go for 2.
43 yards. Mason Kelly, his 4th passing touchdown of the night.
Watch them. They'll go for 2. I guarantee you they got something cooked up for this. They're going to steal this bad boy. Here we go.
Tigers going to go for 2. Direct snap to Kelly, rolling to his right. And it's caught. We'll wait for the ruling. No good. Miami Trace makes a stand.
But in terms of final stats for the game, Trey Robinette, 10 of 25 for 131 yards, 2 touchdowns, also tallied 47 yards on the ground on 8 carries. We knew Garrett Guess was going to have a big impact on the game. Listed as a wide receiver / tight end, and it's kind of one of those cases where you see that as a listing for a player, but they may not line up 50-50 on both spots. Well, for him, it's definitely both. Sometimes he's in tight as kind of a wing back. Sometimes he's on the line. Sometimes he's out wide as a receiver. I will say his first 3 catches of the night, and I kind of keeping track, his first 2 were for first downs, and his third one was for a touchdown, so definitely somebody you look for in high-pressure situations. But finishes overall 7 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown. Gage Stuckey also with a touchdown reception. Just 1 catch for him, 21 yards was that touchdown. And then Asher Laboa, player you said to look out for in the preseason episode, 28 carries, 156 yards, and a touchdown. And one other receiver I wanted to make mention of was Connor Napier. Did not record a reception, however, in the first half alone had 4 or 5 targets. And obviously targets not really something that's really kept in high school. It's more of an NFL college type statistic. But in future box scores, would not surprise me to see Connor Napier in there. Maybe not right next to Garrett Guess, as he's kind of the established receiver and has been for a couple years. But it would not surprise me to see Connor Napier competing with him for a target share. Now we're starting to get into like fantasy talk. But
not on this show.
Connor Napier, definitely a player I would continue to look out for, although didn't have a reception in this game. Now for Waverly, with the loss, still a great game overall. Now Mason Kelly, 19 of 46. Now that's, obviously the first game of the season. So there were some drops, some miscues overall on the offense. A 41% completion percentage for Kelly. However, 366 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. I mean, you can't argue with that.
Right.
Did not maybe complete as many passes as they were looking for, but, I mean, the results were still there in terms of yardage and touchdowns. Cody Swartz, a big first night, 8 catches for 173 yards, 2 touchdowns. Tight end Mason Sparks, 4 catches for 65 yards. And then Lane Bear had 3 receptions for 64 yards, had the big catch at the end from 43 yards out. And then Mason Pollard had 3 catches for 33 yards and had the 4th touchdown from Kelly. Tough night on the ground for Jace Hurd. Only 15 yards on 13 carries. Kid ran for 1,400 yards last year. That's not something I would be very worried about in terms of a season-long thing. Just a tough first game. It wouldn't surprise me if he ran for 200 yards next week against Zane Trace. So
he's the type of back that, like, if they can get some sort of positive with him, he's going to get rolling. Because, I mean, when you look at that Waverly team, what was back, you're going to focus a lot on him. So Miami Trace selling out on the run, and Kelly burnt them for 366 yards through the air. So, I think that'll probably be more of a 50-50 split in the future instead of like 98 to 2% split on the yardage. So, that for Waverly to have success, that's definitely got to balance out, and I think it probably will.
And, that's all I had for that game. For Miami Trace, they're back home against Wilmington week 2, and I already mentioned Waverly at Zane Trace in week 2. We've talked about that a couple times already. That should be a good game to watch for, as both teams are coming off of losses and looking to get in the win column here in 23. So
yeah, do you say the Miami Trace at Wilmington?
No, at home.
Oh, so Kane Pride's going to come rolling into
that game
after being on the West Coast.
What?
Hurricane.
I gotcha. Are they the Wilmington Hurricanes?
Nope. Hurricane.
Oh, the Wilmington
Singular.
Hurricane, just one big. Okay.
Yep. I got a Kane Pride shirt for all my months as a teacher there. Yeah. Hey, we went over 500 JV baseball, and it was their, I believe it was their second consecutive varsity season going over 500. And it was the first time they'd had back-to-back seasons in like 30 years of being over 500. So
can't argue with positive production. So.
Yes. Oh yeah, positive production gets positive results.
There we go.
I reckon. So our last review is if you look at a full 48 minutes, might be the best played game of the week. Defensively and offensively, 2 teams that are going to look to be there in the end of the season. Maybe being the last team standing in our coverage area. Wheelersburg at Ironton. The Fighting Tigers. the tank was packed. I had heard an estimated 11,000 fans were expected. I didn't hear what the final.
Could it hold that?
I don't know.
I've never been there.
I haven't been there. It looks really cool.
Oh yeah, because it has the roofed
Yeah.
seats on. I'm assuming Ironton's sideline.
I would think,
but the press box is on the away side, which is not normal.
Yeah,
but still
it probably takes up some room, and
still definitely one of the cooler stadiums in our coverage area, probably the state as a whole as well. So
so it's the tank was rocking. It's a state runner-up from last year. They beat Wheelersburg in a knockdown drag-out fight last year, 12-3. And, this game, it seemed like it was going to be completely in Ironton's, way, as they got an interception at the 1-yard line. So speaking of a 99-yard touchdown drive, on the third play from after the interception, Sean Terry went around to end 86 yards. And I assume the tank was rocking at that point. 86 yards for the score for the 3-star recruit. And then on the next possession that they got after forcing a punt, Zane Williams scored. I believe it was an 8-yard touchdown run. Or no, it was a 28-yard touchdown run to make it a 14-0 game. The next possession, Wheelersburg was able to bounce back. Braylon Rucker connected with Devin Lattimore for a score before Landon Hutchinson evened things up with a short run to make it 14-14 at the break. Now, I said 17-7. I should have said 17-14. I would have been spot on, because the first drive after the half, Ironton goes 13 plays. They stall out inside the 10, but a 24-yard field goal from David Fields was good, and that's all the scoring that was needed. Ironton forces 2 punts, pulls down an interception, and then gets a turnover on downs to finish the game. And they go home with a 17-14, or stay at home with a 17-14 victory. Two teams that just, it was going to be a battle no matter what. Wheelersburg was led in rushing by Creed Warren. Rucker threw a couple picks, but was solid overall for them in his first start. Probably, unless they make like a super deep playoff run while he's there, may not face as much like nervousness as he would have faced in that game as his first ever start, and especially being at Ironton. Bailey Thacker led the Fighting Tigers in rushing on the night. Zane Williams had around 50 yards. Terry had over 100 yards total offense. Guys we kind of highlighted in the preseason. I know Noah Patterson and that offensive line really did a good job. And they just, maintained possession, played, relied on their defense a lot. And sometimes early in the season you have to do that. Sometimes you can rely on your offense early in the season. But that Ironton defense always plays, and that's a very good win for Ironton, with replacing all those skill guys from last year and still being able to defend the home field. For Ironton in week 2, they will host Jackson in the Ironton Classic. It's game 3 of the day. It's $20 to get in, but that ticket gets you all 3 games, which I think could make for a long day. But at the same time, it's going to be high quality football played down there at the tank, especially with them taking on Jackson, who's 1-0 after a 22-0 win over an old SEOAL rival in the Logan Chieftains. So, that's a good win for them. Wheelersburg, it might get a little easier, but not much, as Cincinnati Archbishop McNicholas will make the trip along the river to travel to Wheelersburg at Ed Miller Stadium. So that'll be a good week 2 matchup for them to try to get things going in the right direction, as, for Wheelersburg, they want to get things right as they move into league play. Yeah.
I was just going to say, so we'll look at some impact players. We have 5 total from week 1. I'll get things rolling here. It's somebody we've talked about, I think, 2 different segments now in the reviews and the previews. It's Chase Heiland for the Portsmouth Trojans. 25 carries, 247 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns to go along with 4 catches for 40 yards and a touchdown. For anybody wondering, that is 56.7 PPR fantasy points, which is probably good enough to be the most in one game any given NFL season. I know last year I think Joe Mixon had like 55 something, so it would have been good for the most last year. Just an all-around game. I mean, if a receiver has 40 catches for 40 yards and a touchdown, it's like, oh, it's a pretty good receiving game. Well, when you pair that with 247 yards on the ground and 3 rushing touchdowns, it's like, okay, like this kid is one of the most versatile players in our coverage area. Obviously not going to replicate that every week, but just the threat alone of him being able to come out of the backfield, having Cobb and Copley to not only block for him, but change the pace of the game, that's a dangerous backfield to go against every week. And I think West is probably going to have their hands full a little bit this week with those 3. But, I mean, we'll see what happens. It was one of our games to preview for a reason. So
yeah, and for Cameron Williams, that just makes life a little bit easier. As a freshman, I almost said true freshman.
I mean, it's not wrong.
Assumingly a true freshman. As a freshman to have your first game at quarterback, and then, he ran for
77 yards, I think.
So he had a really good game, and that just makes that backfield just dynamic. If you've got, kind of a 3-headed monster back there, because Cobb was getting 6 or 7 yards a carry too, and Copley out, as you mentioned, had a big game. But having someone like Heiland, that's really nice to have. That Portsmouth offensive line did a really good job blocking for him, and I think he's going to be a player to watch for sure. Best of luck for him to stay healthy throughout the season.
Right.
So we could see some really big numbers for the junior.
Yep.
And then next we go to, I don't have a nickname for Greenfield. We go to Greenfield,
The City of Beauty, or
the School of Beauty.
School of Beauty.
Yeah, the School of Beauty. Greenfield, McClain, Andrew Potts. Pretty much picked up where he left off last year. 24 carries, 114 yards, 4 tutties on the night. He is a booming back. He also had a touchdown called back for a hold that would have been, I believe I read 56 yards, something like that. And then I don't know if they were like giving him a play off because he had just ran through them, but the next play, Caden Penwell ran for a huge touchdown. So for the Tigers, they took on a Dina squad that's on another new coach, as they've just been kind of
rotate. It seems like they've had 2 or 3 coaches in the last 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah, so I believe this is the 4th coach in 4 years.
Okay.
They've trying to figure things out there, as they had one of their best classes ever, graduated the COVID year, and they're trying to get back on their feet, and Andrew Potts was making sure they did not in that game.
Making things a little bit
as
tougher.
McClain is a program that was down for a few years, and they seem like they have kind of figured some stuff out with a coaching change there, and that would be with John Penwell, former Adina coach.
Yep.
So getting things right in that way, and McClain kind of just ran all over Adina to I believe 41-14 victory. Yeah, so impressive for him. He also added a pair of catches for 33 yards. Teammate, backfield mate, Caden Penwell led the Tigers with 118 yards on only 6 carries, also had a score. He also had 3 catches, 63 yards, and a score as well. So that's almost a twofer there, as Penwell had a big game.
It seems to be kind of a boom and zoom type.
Yeah.
At least from the week 1 box score.
Yeah, so it's McClain, we'll get to see them in person, Lord willing, on Friday, and
referee willing
on Friday, and they had their way with the Warriors in week 1. It was a classic last year when they took on Northwest, and with Potts and Penwell, it has a chance to be that way again this year.
So another player that we've, once again, a lot of these players we've highlighted from our game reviews, as a lot of the games we previewed in the last week had a lot of big-time performances. It's Mason Kelly, right? 366 yards, 4 touchdowns through the air, and no interceptions as well.
Yeah.
Only completed 41% of his passes. It's a week 1 game. The completion percentage is obviously going to go up as, I think all of these guys have played together last year, but they're going to continue to gel. I mean, the chemistry will... it's your first time playing against a different team in a game that, counts. So, obviously, the jitters will go away and the chemistry will improve and, everything will get better. And really a game that they were 1 completion and 2 yards away from winning. So, they'll get Zane Trace week 2. If the completion percentage goes up, I mean, you're talking 400 yards a game now because he had 366 on 41. And then, obviously, I think the connection with Cody Swords will be a big deal. I mean... 8 catches for 173 yards and 2 touchdowns. Both of those touchdowns were in the first. Definitely had a bigger first half than second half. But when you see a lot more attention going to Cody Swords, then it's like, okay, here comes Pollard, Sparks, maybe even Hurd out of the backfield. And Lane Bear had a big fourth quarter as well for them. So a lot of weapons to use. Would not surprise me if he replicates that, or at least a similar box score this upcoming week and weeks after. I think Mason Kelly's going to be a huge factor. I think any quarterback is going to be a huge factor for a team's success, but I think Mason Kelly is a little bit above the normal standards there for impact on a team. So
yeah, and we'll get into that in the game preview, but it's going to be necessary for him to have another big game coming up this week as well. So it's a bunch of it's a team that can really air it out, and that. Being able to air it out like that is going to make life easier for Jace Hurd.
Well, that's what I was going to say. In a game where Hurd is, there's not a lot of room, it's nice to have somebody that can throw for 366 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now, if there's a game where Hurd, has, a little bit better yards, under 1 yard or a little bit over 1 yard per carry, and a game where he has a little bit more success and, there's a little bit more focus on the run game, although it seemed like all of Miami Trace's focus was on the run game. It'll obviously open up a lot more things through the air than it traditionally would, where they're just kind of eyeing the pass. Waverly has a ton of weapons. They're a tough team to defend, and I don't expect that to change at really any point in this season. So,
moving on, speaking of through the air, we look at Aaron Walters of Logan Elm, 22 of 30 for 262 yards, 3 scores, 0 interceptions as well. For him, one of the things are Ty Dalla. Yeah. With what Tyler said was, this quarterback's really good. And, he's right. Walters is very good. He's got some nice weapons with Cam Smith and Carson Summers, each over 90 yards receiving on the night. He also connected with Camden Red for another score. And he's got some weapons on the outside. The running game, they were a little over 100 yards rushing, so it wasn't all focused on through the air. If they can just get, close to a 40-60 split, with 60 being the pass, that's going to make them really hard to stop. I mentioned in the preseason show, I know they didn't love us picking all against them, but in the preseason show, I mentioned if they can get that win, I think they've got a decent chance to start 6-0 before Bloom Carroll, and it's going to be a lot of that behind Aaron Walters in that passing game. It's a dynamic offensive attack with Landon Thompson in the backfield too, so it's going to be a team to watch for as they, take on Westfall and maybe are bet the over game of the week in that one. And
we'll have to see what on Fantastic 50, what the spread, and do they do over and under as well?
They don't, but I think there's a way to figure it out.
You can look at the way the spread is set up and just kind of figure it out that way, but it should be a good Pickaway County matchup.
County Classic, and I know a couple years ago came down to the last minutes, and it should be a fun one to watch. Both teams coming in 1-0, which hasn't happened a lot.
Right. So the last player that we'll highlight as one of our impact players of the week is Northwest's Connor Lintz. Had a Kellen Winslow-like game against Southeastern in week 1. Had 6 catches. Well, I'll get to that later. Had 6 catches for 129 yards, 3 touchdowns. Also had a 90-yard kick return for a touchdown. And on the other side of the ball, had an interception and a fumble recovery.
That's decent.
Did just about everything you can possibly do. The only thing I could think that you could have added is like a blocked punt or something, or a blocked field goal, or maybe even a sack on defense, or thrown for a touchdown. I mean, now we're getting picky. I mean, the kid did everything he could for this team.
Did he work in the concession stand at halftime too?
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, he helped
might have played in the band during halftime.
Right, it dotted the I. Although there isn't an I in Mohawks, or in Northwest, so. But we get the point there. But did just about everything he possibly could to help the Mohawks pick up nearly a shutout win, a 38-8 win over Southeastern in week 1. So definitely, a lot of good box scores there. Lentz, there's definitely the most defensive, impactful player there. But a lot of good.
Like Cam Smith for Logan Elm had 2 picks also to go with 90 yards off or receiving. Newton Hoops broke that Unioto school record. Yep. There's just a lot of really good performances, and hopefully we're going to try to highlight as many kids as we can every week, and hopefully some other guys have some big games here in week 2 coming up as well.
So speaking of week 2, we'll jump right into our previews for the upcoming week of high school football. I'll start things off with Portsmouth at Portsmouth West, a little crosstown rivalry. We were able to live stream that game last year at the Trojan Coliseum. It was a 34-7, a little bit of a lopsided victory for, I think it's safe to say, probably the best Portsmouth West football team they've ever had. I mean, the only league champion they've ever had.
Well, they did get to the state championship game in 2002.
They did?
As an 8 seed.
Okay.
Yeah. How's that for?
That doesn't happen too often.
And those guys were ridiculous athletes, because that was around my time, and they were very impressive.
But for the Trojans, I mean, you have the usual. It's going to be a lot of Chase Heiland, Nick Copley, Cam Williams, Levon Cobb. If they have to get more pass heavy, maybe expect a couple more of the guys out wide to step in. And then for West, coming in 0-1, same thing as last year. West comes in after losing to Fairland. Portsmouth going to come in after beating Valley. But for West, as of now, doesn't seem like going to do a whole lot through the air, right? They had 6 pass attempts in week 1, although Portsmouth only had 7 pass attempts as well, so this could be a very ground and pound type game. It'll be played on turf, but definitely not going to be a lot of through the air stuff. I expect this will probably be a lower scoring game, although both teams just put up over 28 points, because, I mean, obviously Portsmouth scored 59 and Portsmouth West scored 29, so... Or, excuse me, 20. No, it was 29, because 32-29. I don't think it'll be very high scoring. I think it'll be a time of possession deal where it's just a lot of, not really run the clock out. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for the clock to stop unless somebody runs out of bounds. I think the ball is going to stay on the ground, not going to be a whole lot of incomplete passes. But look for Cole Tipton and Mason Pollard to kind of handle things on the ground for the Senators. Jeffrey and Anthony Bishop are in the mix as well. So, are we going to make picks on these games?
As long as we're not streaming it.
Okay, that's fair. Even though I think we've made picks on both the games we streamed last week.
Well, I made a pick on the last one because I wasn't going to be there.
Oh, right. So West and Portsmouth. I think I'm going to roll with Portsmouth. I think they kind of demonstrated good tendencies on stopping the run against Valley. Now, obviously, West probably a little better than Valley, especially up front. It's a tough one. I think you could really make an argument either way. I'll roll with Portsmouth. I picked them last week. They scored more points. Chase Heiland thinks he's Christian McCaffrey, so I'll roll with the Trojans.
I'm going to take West in that one. I do think it'll be high scoring.
Oh, you think it'll be high scoring?
Yeah.
See, I don't.
I'm going to say high scoring. I think there'll be some points. Fun fact, in the last 15 years, West holds an 8-7 advantage in that series.
Okay, so they took the lead last year.
Yeah, so they took the lead last year. It's been a very even series overall. which I think if you look back, we'll say 40 years, people from Portsmouth probably would be screaming like, "Oh, we're never going to be that small enough to play West," as they've definitely dropped off in
class
school size, enrollment size. But it's been a really good series, at least in the last 15 years. I'm sure if we look back even further, it probably would be as well there. But I'm going to take West. Just I think it'll be. I think the Rock. They're not going to lose at the Rock 2 straight weeks.
The one thing I like about me being able to make picks is it's not on paper like yours are, so I can just kind of say whatever I want. And
we'll see what I say when I get asked the picks on Thursday.
But I like. Yeah. I'm not really keeping track because I don't pick all the same games that you guys did. It's kind of just like 4 or 5. I think all the games we did pick for were on the ballot, but there were some that we didn't discuss. Like I know East Clinton and Huntington were on there. We didn't talk about them. I'm sure there was probably another one, but I think Unioto Vinton County may have been on there. We didn't really specifically talk about that game, but I definitely like the freedom of just being able to freely say whatever I'd like and not really have a record kept for me. So
I'm sure somebody out there will be able to do it.
Well, I'm sure I'll get flamed once West beats Portsmouth by 50, and they're like, "Oh, you picked, what are you doing? You wrote us off." So
and they didn't write back.
Right.
All right, Gino. All right, so then next, I'm going to jump to Jackson at Ironton. I mean, that's a Saturday night game. Ironton won it last year, 29-26 at Jackson.
29-26?
29-26. Both teams graduated a lot of skill position players. Ironton does hold a series edge in the last 15 years, 4-3.
Only played 7 times in 15 years?
Yeah, so...
Okay. How many years have they played consecutively?
I don't have that offhand, but I'm going to say 7.
So they've played... Okay.
Yeah, so now they both were the SEOAL for a cup of coffee. Jackson was always in it, but I think Ironton was only in it for a couple years, so that may have been in the last 15, so, if I wanted to do some more research, but I'm late tired, so I don't know about that right now. So, but both teams have to replace their quarterbacks. Jackson has a little bit more back in the backfield. Does Jackson have someone that can slow down Sean Terry when he gets the ball? What can they do to eliminate him getting the ball? Thacker had a nice game running the ball last week, as did right offhand, I'm thinking of it right now. I'm going to look through my notes. Zane Williams, for Ironton. Jackson did have a shutout last week, so it could be a really defensive matchup. I think with Cade Wolford, if they can get him out in space, that could be a really fun matchup. If Terry can get out, if those two can go one-on-one in space, I think that'd be a really fun matchup to watch. For Jackson, it's going to be tough for them to win on the road, but I think defensively, they're going to do some things that are going to really make life hard for Ironton. They'll probably try to sell out in the box and then, put some extra help on Terry. I just see this as a very low-scoring game also. I think last week we might have seen what Ironton's games are going to be in their matchups with the better teams, and Jackson's going to be one of those better teams they see. I'm going to say Ironton at home 14-10 is going to be my guess on this one.
I think I can agree with that.
I think it's going to be just a knockdown, drag-out fight. Right. It's going to be warm. Even with it being the third game of the day, I think it's going to be hot. It's going to be kind of the
main event.
Yeah, it's ding, ding, ding. It's time for the main event. I wouldn't be surprised if, being a Nike elite school, they're able to bring in one of the buffers to announce.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be a big time game at the Tank. And, it's going to be, it's not going to be on their MyTown TV. I think it's like Flow Sports is going to have it, so it's going to be streamed. But if you're anywhere in the area, it's going to be Saturday. It's going to be all day. Get down to the tank. It's going to be another really big game.
Mm-hmm. So, would you like to
I'll take
dip here, and then we'll wrap up with our, as of now, presumed live stream game of the week?
Fingers crossed, live stream game of the week. Yeah, moving on to Waverly at St. Trace. We talked a little bit about St. Trace's struggles to stop the pass against Logan Elm, and if they can't fix that, that's going to be something for Waverly, where St. Trace was able to do a little bit better against the run against Logan Elm. Are they going to focus more on stopping the pass, and is that going to open things up for Jace Hurd? Mm-hmm. Or are the 56 Masons that the masonry mason jar, the jar of Masons, will it be opened for Waverly as Mason Kelly finding his bevy of Mason
pass catchers?
Yeah, Mason Pollard and Mason Sparks, along with Lane Bear and Cody Swords. It's a bevy of receivers to go along with Jace Hurd in the backfield. Is Zane Trace going to be able to stop the run and the pass? They struggled in the secondary last week. How are they going to adjust now for Zane Trace? Are they going to be able to expose some of the same stuff that Miami Trace was against Waverly, and be able to hit them, a little bit in the air, a little bit on the ground also? Blake Phillips is still outstanding in the backfield. Carter Langley, he threw a couple interceptions last week, but he's been a really efficient quarterback for them. Mm-hmm. Are they going to be able to run the ball to make it a little bit easier in the passing game to find an Aiden Dunn on the outside? Are they going to be able to find a third running back? I mentioned Hartzell in the preseason. I still think that's the back to do it. Only had 2 touches in week 1. I know they're looking to do a little more spread action. I think Hartzell's the one that could really, with some sweep actions and whatnot, can really expose that, where Blake Phillips is a little more of the thunder and the thunder and lightning. I think Hartzell could really do it. And if Hartzell can get going, then that's going to make Langley even more dangerous and, give them the opportunity to put up a lot of points. They scored 23 against Logan Elm, but they're going to need to put up some more points to beat a Waverly team that can possibly throw for a lot of yardage. Once again, 366 in week 1, but very few rushing yards. Jace Hurd's going to have to get going more than 15 yards on the ground. It was like
Well, I was going to say it was a big difference from last year's game against Miami Trace. I think had over 30 carries for over 200 yards on the ground compared to now 13 carries for 15 yards. So definitely a big change in the box score for the Tigers.
Yeah, so I'm going to take the Pioneers at home. It's they burnt me last week. I believe in them. I think they're going to win a tight one over the Tigers.
I'll roll with Waverly just because you picked St. Trace. I think it's fair in most cases for if it's going to be like a tight game, I think we can split.
Yeah. Somebody's got to, obviously someone's going to win, but this is going to be big for, how's your season going to roll after this? Because week 3, they both have tough matchups as well.
That's what I was going to ask, was who St. Trace had week 3.
North Union. I
know West Union. I don't know North Union.
North Union's a pretty good program. It's out of Richland. It's a pretty good trip for them. They
didn't play them last year.
No, this is a new pickup. They were kudos to Zane Trace because they were trying to up their non-league schedule, and they picked up Waverly and North Union. So to go along with the Logan home game that's been there for a long time. So for Zane Trace, it's a maybe not a must win for what they want to do in the season, which is, win the SVC, host another playoff game, and then, continue on throughout the playoffs. But it's a big game for them. For Waverly, playing in the SOC too, which, as an SVC guys, this is kind of hard to say, is a much tougher conference than the SVC at this current state. Right. Yeah. For them, it's a needed win for them, as they are them and Unioto are pulled into the Southwest into that Region 16 for the playoffs. So if they want to have any chance of having a home playoff game, this is a must win for them, because I think Zane Trace will get them a lot of points if they can get that win. So you picked Waverly, I picked Zane Trace.
We picked opposites in the previous one as well. So
yeah. So now let's talk about our preview of
our game of the week.
Yes, that we'll see.
That we'll see if it actually. I can't think of in recent memory of a high school game being canceled, because I'm guessing during COVID it happened a little bit.
Yeah. Now
but recently
I've seen in baseball,
right?
Because football, you're far away as an official, so I think you're not dealing with as much extra nonsense that basketball and baseball officials are seeing, or even soccer, because let's face it, a lot of people don't know soccer, so they just kind of yell at the refs because they don't really know.
Right.
And if that's why we're having a shortage in football officials, then come on, people, we got to do better, because we need officials to play.
Well, and it's not like with basketball where you can get away with two, or even in baseball, in a dire situation you can get away with one. It's not preferable, but in football, you need a crew.
Yeah,
you can't get away with two officials. That's just not going to work. You need whatever it is,
and
6.
And it's for safety too, because you gotta be able to make sure that nothing wild's going on, because there's a lot of field to cover. And I guess you can get away with 5
if you had to.
Yeah, if you had to, but getting 6 on a game is what you need, and hopefully
they can get that figured out by Friday.
They can get some people down Roy Rogers' way.
So going into the actual preview of this Friday's matchup between the McClain Tigers and the Northwest Mohawks. What a game that was a season ago. 36-35. McClain took that one at home. Both teams coming in 1-0 with wins over SVC schools. For Northwest, it was a 38-8 win over Southeastern. McClain 41-23 over Adena. Now, the one thing to look at Northwest is it's Northwest is slowly going to the air raid now. I know last year in the game against Valley, I can't remember the quarterback's first name. His last name was Bolin. I think attempted maybe 2 or 3 passes the entire game. Well, now quarterback Jake Brown, still not as much as maybe some other schools, but 7 of 15. 15 passes in a game is a lot more than 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. For 129 yards with 3 touchdowns, which is a lot of touchdowns for only 129 yards. And it's a lot of touchdowns for only 7 completions. Almost half of his completions went to the end zone. Now, you have Colton Campbell, who, as of now, appears to be the lead back. Okay, you lose Wyatt Brackman last year. Very, very has a strong resemblance of Peyton Hillis. Yeah. So that's who I thought of when I saw him run. But Campbell in that game, 9 rushes for 66 yards and a touchdown. And even last year, with the lack of passing on the Northwest team with a guy like Connor Lintz, in order to get him the ball, it was a lot of jet sweep stuff and a lot of speed option type plays to get him in open space. Well, now you can air the ball out a little more, and I think we're kind of getting a glimpse on how impactful that could be for Northwest. 6 catches, 129 yards, 3 touchdowns. We already talked about the kick return for a touchdown, and then had a fumble recovery and interception as well. Now we'll look to McClain. We've talked about them a little bit as well. Andrew Potts had a great game, 4 touchdowns, 114 yards on the ground. Caden Penwell, 118 yards on the ground, only on 6 carries. A touchdown, had 3 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown as well. Quarterback Drake Stapleton, 8 for 17, 144 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. So clearly both of these teams rely on the run a little bit more than the pass, but both very similar in pass attempts. I think they match up pretty evenly. It was a close game last year. Really don't see that changing this year. I'm going to go with the Mohawks at home in McDermott pulling this one out.
Well, I'm going to go Oppo Taco. I'm going to go with the McClain Tigers. I think with Potts and Penwell, and I think even though it's on the road, and according to Fantastic 50, they are 4-point dogs on the road.
That's a little, I guess, low, but that's a little, I would not make it that wide of a spread.
Right. I'm going to take the McClain Tigers, and actually no, McClain was favored by 4.
Okay, so Northwest.
Yeah,
okay.
as usually the bigger school has a little better ranking to start the season. So, but yeah, I think with McClain's, I think with their smash and dash a little bit. I'm just trying to think of all the different cliches to use to, have the big strong running back and then the really fast running back.
Smash and dash. I haven't heard that before. It's always been just boom and zoom. That's what they called Daniel Herron and Brandon Zane back in whatever that was, 2010.
Yeah. But it's a dynamic offense. If they can complete some passes, they have a good kicking game. I do think it'll be a 1-score game, though. I think it'll be.
I think it'll be
tight,
close.
Yeah, I think with Northwest, they've had 4 consecutive winning seasons. It's going to be really tough in the SOC2 as they return to, the big school football. So they got to win. It's as much of a must-win game for a non-conference in week 2 as it can be for Northwest, as they are facing the bigger schools now, and as they wanted to go into SOC, wanted to help reestablish their program, and they've done so. 4 consecutive winning seasons. They won the SOC a couple times in there. They've gotten themselves in a good position to have success moving forward. And for them, it's a must win. McClain, 4 wins each of the last 2 years after having a long run of, to be honest, futility. They were just not a very good program for a long time. And I feel like they've kind of righted their way a good bit. And, with Pinwell and Potts, I think they're going to hammer and jammer their way to a
works for me.
Yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. To a close victory, and I think it'll be a good game.
Big thank you to McDonald's for sponsoring SOSA Overtime. John, do you have any more or any final clarifying thoughts? Or
I mean, I think if we look at the schedule, there's going to be some other games that, can maybe define teams. Bern Union at Notre Dame. Obviously, Notre Dame, as we mentioned at the beginning, was much better than Manchester. It'll be interesting to see where they're at, as, we didn't talk about Notre Dame a whole lot in the preseason. So it'll be interesting to see where they're at. Goshen at Hillsboro. I thought Hillsboro had a decent showing in week 1.
Yeah.
Goshen lost at Piketon, or lost at home to Piketon. Kind of can see where maybe Hillsboro is in comparison to a Piketon. Piketon's got Oak Hill at home. Just glancing at the schedule. Vinton County at Circleville. It's a big game for Vinton County.
Get back in the win column.
Yeah, get back in the win column with the TVC really, really struggling in week 1. Kind of be important for them to get back into the winning ways. Just looking at some other ones. I mean, Paint Valley at West Jefferson. I know Paint Valley has big aspirations to win the SVC, and maybe we put them third.
I was going to say, it feels like everybody, including myself a little bit, has kind of counted them out.
Yeah,
a little
with
bit.
Chambers
It's kind of just, well, is it going to be Unioto or Zane Trace? Well, I mean, Paint Valley is still there. They've won, however many gold balls. Kind of made the play. They were making the playoffs before making the playoffs was cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
but before the playoffs were expanding, they were making it.
Right.
They were making it when it was 4 teams. Then it went to 8, and they were making it routinely. Now it's 16. I'm going to guess they're going to make it for a long time at 16 teams. They've got a dynamic running back in Braylon Robertson. Still, even with not having, Dom Chambers to share the load there, as they were kind of a boom and boom combination in the backfield. West Jefferson's a great program. The Rough Riders are a great mascot. And also straight up Wyoming, everything. Same colors and everything.
Oh, yeah.
So, the Rough Riders are an outstanding program. Coach Beals does a great job up there. And it's a big test for Paint Valley. It's not a must win because it's very tough to win at West Jefferson, but it's important for them to continue on the success that they had in week 1 by making the adjustments that Coach Dye and his staff, put into place this week. Continue those adjustments and improvements and just keep getting better. So I think they're a team that we'll talk about a little bit more as we continue on.
As league play starts to heat up.
Yeah,
now matchups with Zane, Trace, and Unioto, and not really the coming weeks, but as the season progresses. So
yeah, and then another one, and this is very we probably won't talk about this much, but Southeastern at Madison Plains. That is a game where.
And you could see how they compare to a fellow SVC team.
Yeah.
Westfall.
And Madison Plains is a program that's not been very good for a while. Sometimes they'll have a couple of big-time players, and they'll be pretty competitive. But we'll see if Southeastern might be able to go on the road and get a win. And it's going to be interesting. Eastern hosts Huntington.
Okay.
That was
SOC 1 champs last year.
Yeah, and Huntington's only win from 2 years ago was there. Or the COVID year was against Eastern.
I think Huntington beat Eastern last year, too.
Because
Eastern started out 1-6.
Yeah, they really struggled early. So I mean,
won the rest of their league games. So.
Yeah, if Eastern's going to do what I'm thinking they're going to do, it's a big game for them to win. It's we'll have. Also Logan Elm and Westfall. Mm-hmm. I mean, because I think that's going to be fun. I think Logan Elm's going to win, but I think it's going to be a fun game to watch.
Well, it's always nice to see how teams compare across conferences and leagues. So the first 5 weeks, for some teams it's only 3 non-league games. Others in the not the MSL, but in the FAC, for example. I mean, you're only going to play half your games are going to be non-league. So it's just kind of exciting to see how you compare.
Going to that, if you look at the FAC, Chillicothe goes to London, who just destroyed Courthouse on Friday. But then Courthouse goes to Western Brown, who had to come back against Hillsboro.
Yeah, I was going to say Hillsboro, I know you mentioned it already, but Hillsboro, a pretty decent showing against a team that has been notorious. I mean, the Novak.
Yeah,
and
having a lot of success over the last few years. And obviously they're kind of at a resetting point, are they at a reloading or a rebuilding or whatever. But it'll be interesting to see where Washington's at right now. I know they got some players to watch, and it'll be interesting to see going forward. So I think this week 2 should be a lot of fun. I'm excited to come back here to McGillicuddy Kennels Studios to talk about it on the weekend, and we'll make sure you follow all of our socials, SOSA on everything. We'll retweet some stuff if our game of the week has to get changed because of refereeing situation. We're hopeful we can get down at McClain and Northwest, but if not, we'll definitely be somewhere.
Make a quick pivot.
Yeah, and we will put it out there everywhere to let people know.
Yep, good week 1 behind us. Hopefully another good week in front of us with week 2 quickly approaching. Thank you for watching this episode of SOSA Overtime presented by McDonald's.
Bad idea, right?